Now at this stage, we can test the pause system in our game. So let's save and go to our level here, the first level. We're going to add the user interface there, but if you directly add it, you will see that it gets collapsed to the top left corner of the screen, and so the score label shows at an offset of that. We want to use a new layer, like we did for our background, to separate the UI from the rest of the game. So select level 01, press Ctrl A, and create a new canvas layer. That layer is going to be, let's call it user interface, and we're going to place it around the top of our level here. Make sure with the node selected that we set the layer to a high number so it shows in front of everything else. And then click and drag user interface.tscn under that node. And you'll see that now it resets, it takes the entire screen. With that, you can press F6 to try the current level. Press escape and you will see the game pause, so the enemy stops moving magically. Now, if you try to click the nodes here, you try to click the buttons or press escape, you will see there's a little issue. I told you the pause system is built into Godot, and by default, when you set the game to paused, all the nodes in the game, like the enemy in the background, it stops moving, it stops processing, it stops reacting to clicks and to signal callbacks. So I'm going to quit the game here to stop it with F8, go back to the user interface, and with the user interface node selected, you want to go down to the pause category. And the mode by default is inherit. So it will inherit from its parent, which in this case is the user interface, which inherits from level 01. And the default mode for the top level node is stop. When you pause the game, everything stops as a result. Going back to the user interface scene, we're going to set the mode here to process, which means that whenever we pause the game, the user interface will not pause. We will still be able to use it. So let's go back, press F6, and so I press escape to pause the game. Now I should be able to retry the game. As you can see, escape to pause, and I can quit. So that way you can test your user interface and see that it works, and that the pause works in just a few lines of code here. Next up, we're going to connect the player data node, which is auto-loaded in our project, so accessible from everywhere, to this user interface. We're going to do that in the ready function because we need all the nodes to be loaded in memory. Let me fire the game just to show you the remote scene tree. So the ready function gets called on every node from top to bottom. So let's say the root node, but then player data. And when it hits main screen, it's gonna not call ready on main screen, it's going to start with its children. So texture rect title. When it hits menu, it's gonna jump to the children, play button, quit button, then menu, and finally main screen. So it goes in the tree order from top to bottom, but then it starts from the deepest children to the parent for each branch in the tree. This is why the auto-loaded nodes will be available in the ready function. They will be loaded before everything else in the game. That is why we can directly call playerData.connect, and we're going to connect the score updated signal to this node. So we have to use self as the second parameter. And we're going to call a new function that we'll call update_interface as a callback for that. I'm going to expand the view as well here. So every time that the score gets updated, we're going to change our score label here. Then we are going to connect the died signal to another function. Let's do that. Let's do the two connections. So I'm going to duplicate this line with Control B, and instead of score updated, we're going to connect player died here, and we're going to connect it to an on player data lowercase player underscore died. And finally, at this point, so we're going to use that update interface function to update the score, and we'll call update interface here, which is going to give us an error because we have to create that function. So copy this update interface, and we're going to place it above our setter down there. Function update interface, it's not going to return anything, and in this one we're just going to update the score label. So the score label is our label here, and I'm going to create a new variable at the top of the script to store it. So onReady variable score colon label, it's of type label, and we can get the node label here. Again, if we are doing that at the top of every script, it's for code readability. Anyone opening our user interface can look at the first lines with our convention and understand that this node depends on the scene tree, on the parse overlay that you can see here, and on the score label. And this helps a lot when your game grows. So that's why even if we could directly call getNode inside our functions, we are trying to give you good practices for your future projects here. Okay, so we're going to do score label dot text is going to be equal, no, I called it score dot text is equal to, and we're going to use the same template as in our score label. So score colon modulo s, and then you can use the modulo sign followed by a value that will come and replace your modulo s here. In our case, player data dot score, and will automatically, when we play the game, replace the modulo s. So you can play level 1, where we added our user interface already, and you can see that the score is set to 0 at the start, and as you hit the coins, it goes up on the UI already. We have one less bit to do. It's to react to the player dying. And the thing we're going to do there is we're going to pause the game. So it's going to show our pause menu, and we'll change just the title of the pause menu. Instead of writing paused, because the death menu will have the same options, retry, main screen, and quit, we're going to have a different text, you died, or something like that. So let's copy the callback function we have in ready when we connect to the player died signal, and right under the ready function, we're going to place that function, player data player died, or I need to add an on here. I'm going to select the text, press Ctrl R to search and replace, and I'm going to replace the text by on underscore player data player died. Replace all. Okay, so this function, same thing, it's a void function, it does not return any value, and there we're going to pause the game, so self.paused equals true, and we're going to update the title label in our pause menu, pause overlay. So for that, again, we go back to the top of the script, we duplicate the score here, we're going to call it pause label or pause title. It's going to be of type label, and we're going to get start to type pause, and you should find pause overlay / title auto-complete it for you. And so now going back to our on player data player died, we're going to get our pause title dot text is going to be equal to you died. There you go. So I know that mechanic of jumping back to the top of the script, adding these onReady variables and jumping back down, and the way we order the code sometimes can seem a bit messy at first, but again, the goal is to make the code as easy to read as possible for your future self, to understand the code you wrote months ago, or for your teammates. It's exactly the same thing. And the conventions that we use at GQuest, we've worked a lot on that to optimize them so that, for example, when we connect to signals, we generally do it in the ready function of our nodes. So it makes sense to have the callbacks, like on player data, player died, as close as possible to your ready function. That way you can see the connection and you can see the result really quickly. The exception to that rule is when you are using a method that other nodes, other parts of your game may call independently from the signal, like we're doing with update interface. Anyway, with that, we have our parse menu. You have to make sure that the parse overlay is hidden by default. And then you will need one more thing in this project. It's to copy that user interface bit, the layer and the user interface scene, to the different levels. So I'll open level 02 in my game. I'm going to right-click, merge from scene, and I'll go find my level 1 where I created my UI setup. So I'm going to go to levels 01 and I want to copy the user interface. Okay, it will probably be added to the bottom of the tree. I'm going to put it back at the top, and voila, we have our score in the second level. You can do that as well in the level template. So I'm going to Control-Shift-O, open level template here, and in my level template I'll do the same. Right-click, merge from scene, go to level 1, double-click user interface, and place the user interface at the top. With that, you have your in-game UI.